Well, good morning and welcome to the annual East Devon AONB Ambassador Network event. Again, sadly this year we're not doing it together in a lovely room. That's just not quite the timing right for that yet with a lot of people, but fingers crossed for next year that we really do get back to being able to meet and network together face to face. The upside always of these is that we get some people who couldn't make it because you can squeeze it into a narrower time frame. So it swings and roundabouts, but we're very grateful to you all for joining us, and we're loving seeing you all on here. Of course, we also managed to save a few pennies as well as an AONB because we don't have to provide you with food and drink because you're all doing that for yourselves. So there's even an economy of scale in doing this by Zoom. That's not why we do it, but we don't mind if you pop away quickly to get a refreshment or take a little refreshment break. I'm going to hand you back to Chris in a moment to run through the day's events, but I do want to say a few words. We have an unbelievable asset here in the East Devon area of outstanding natural beauty. It's a place I chose to come to live 20 years ago, and I'm never going to leave it. So, that's probably enough said on that. That probably terrifies some of you that will never leave. On the other hand, it's an area that does need protection. That's why it's a protected landscape, and we need to work hard to maintain that. We have a fantastic team that does that, and I know they're going to be gloriously embarrassed by me always saying this, but to you all on the AONB team, we are absolutely blessed to have you. You do an astonishing amount with so little, and we're very, very proud of you and delighted with all that you do. And this year, that is just taking a whole new dimension with the Farming in Protected Landscapes budget that we have been given to deploy, and the Communities Project Fund that we continue to have, which gives us a chance to engage with and work with a wide range of communities, businesses, farmers, all aspects of what goes on in our AONB in trying to kind of, I would hesitate to use the word improve, but to work together to try and maintain the balance that is so important in a permitted landscape. So we've got more chance to do stuff than we've ever had in the whole time I've been involved with these grants. So we are working hard to make those have as positive an impact as possible. So, on a really high note from where we've been over the last couple of years, the AONB has plans, and there'll be lots of changes that are going to want to be discussed on here today, post the Glover review and the outcome of that and the beginnings of the consultation. But I think the future is probably brighter for AONBs today than it has been for a long time. So on that note, I'm going to hand you back to Chris. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you for your kind words about the team. Much appreciated. Just a quick run through the timings for today. I will run through a quick update of our work over the last year and a kind of heads up to what's coming around the corner. Pete Youngman, our project officer, will update you on our activity and engagement in farming. Be followed by Lindi, our new wildlife officer, who will give you an update on our special species and engagement work. And then we'll take a break. We may have an opportunity before that break if you've got any questions from those presentations that you want to put forward. And then after the break, I'll take you through the Glover review, the landscape review, and the ongoing, the consultation that's taking place at the moment. So that's the timetable. Hopefully we'll meet that, and let's crack on. So for those of you that are not familiar with the AONB, I'm just going to run through a little bit of background to us and what we do and who we are. You've met Alistair, who's our chairman, representative of the CLA. Penny Mills is our vice chairman, representative of CPRE. I think Penny's in the call today. And then we have a wide range of other organisations that sit on the AONB partnership and represent the interests across the AONB. And you can see that's quite a broad body of interests, and includes a representative from the ambassadors, Derek Carter, who's in the call today as well. The partnership has grown over the years and slightly more diverse range of parties involved in trying to support the work we do to deliver the management plan for the AONB. Our team has grown over the last year. The core team of myself as manager, Pete as project officer, and Kelly, who has put everything here together today and keeps us in check and balance with our comms work. But we've been supplemented, added to, enhanced by 2 new officers this year. Lou Maddox, who's our admin officer for our Farming in Protected Landscapes programme, and Lindi Rich, who's our wildlife officer. And we've got Lindi and Lou for 2 years and potentially longer, depending on what happens with government funding. So it's nice to grow the team and to cover a wider spectrum of work. And then there's you, our ambassadors, who are part of what we do and part of how we work across this area. And many of you in the call today have been involved with us in all sorts of ways with our projects over the last 20 years. You share our passion for the landscape and the area. And those of you that have signed up to the Ambassador Scheme have pledged to raise awareness about the AONB and be environmentally conscious in how you deliver your work, your duties, your interests, your life. And in return, we try and help to promote you with events like this, which we normally do in person, as Alistair said, and also field events that we do. I've done for many years out in the AONB in the summer months, and they've been curtailed as well, unfortunately. And we are creating an online resource for use, which I hope I can click on a link here and see if it works to show you. Does that come up? Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So we've got a hub portal that we've developed on our website for our ambassadors that is password protected, and it provides a range of resources and information about the AONB and the ambassadors. You can get access to the logo if you want to put that on your business information or your websites. We've got social media content, and we've already noticed some of our ambassadors starting to use this. We've got some text, some information that you might like to use that outlines our approach and how you can apply that to your particular areas of work. We've got links to our social media channels and our leaflets, our guides, our key guides at the moment being the East Devon Way Guide and the Discover leaflet. We've got a gallery that's a little limited at the moment, but we intend to do something about that over the coming year. And then some information about us, which you're free to share. Some of these videos you may well have seen yourselves in the past from some of our presentations or events. There's a video tour that was collated as part of our national conference work last year. And then a series of clips and videos from some of the field trips that were part of that, which if you haven't seen them, very interesting introduction to the AONB and some of the activities that are taking place. There's a link through to the Communities Project Fund and some details about that, and the contact information for Derek Carter, the AONB representative, if there are any issues there that you wish to direct through Derek towards us. So that's an online resource that's been created for your use. Please have a look at that if you get a chance. I think Kelly's going to send out information about that with passwords to you, and give us your feedback about that. And hopefully it's something we can grow and develop with you. So looking back over the last year, we've, as a team, we've continued to work from home. I'm in the office today because, like Alistair, I've had electrical issues. And it just came back on Monday, but also the broadband's better here. But at the moment, the team is all working remotely from home, which has been a challenge, difficult, particularly for our new officers, and we've tried to address that as best we can. And hopefully in the coming months, we will start to progressively have a more direct engagement. So in terms of the work we've been doing, we've been continuing with our special species work, and Ruth has been doing that with us, and Lindi more recently. I won't steal her thunder and talk about the details in here, but Lindi will tell you a bit about our species recovery work. Alongside that, we've been delivering an Arts Council project called Nature Connections, sort of subtitle Roots, which I'll take you through to a link on in a minute, but that's about providing opportunities for different audiences to engage in nature, in the environment, because it's, particularly young children, it's well understood that if you can get kids actively involved in the environment and in nature, it leads to positive environmental behaviours in their later years. And we're keen to try and support and develop that. In the summer months of last year, we hosted the national conference. Normally that's done physically, and all the AONBs come down to a region across the country. Last year it was supposed to be in Devon, or year before it was supposed to be in Devon, and we had to cancel that. And then we took it on and did it remotely. And that's where those videos came from. It was quite an undertaking, but it worked very well. And also in the summer months, DEFRA launched the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme, which was part of the Agricultural Transition Programme, a 3-year funding programme of £42 million across AONBs and national parks. And I'm not going to say any more about that because Pete's going to talk about that in his presentation. And then having received that funding, we have used part of that funding and the offsetting of that funding to enable us to appoint 2 new staff. As I've already mentioned, Lou, who's doing our FIPL administration, and Lindi, who's our wildlife officer. We held our annual meeting, which was also virtual, and that went pretty well. We saw the outgoing chief exec of the National Association, Howard Davis, join us and give us his vision for the future. And we also had Simon Rowe from Ambios in South Devon talk a bit about rewilding, which is becoming increasingly a popular term to explain, I guess, a more nature-friendly form of farming across our landscapes. We also had our elections, and Alistair and Daniel were both re-elected into their positions. And then in the latter part of this financial year, we've finally heard a response from the government on the Glover review, and the consultation is taking place at the moment. So I will talk you through that a little bit later. So specifically on some of the project areas that we've been working on this year, we have produced a State of Nature report for the AONB, which is going to help us in producing a nature recovery plan for the AONB, which is an ambition that was identified and clarified on our culture declaration. I'm hoping this link will work here. Take you through to an online, let it load a bit, an online storyboard of that State of Nature report. Again, these links will be provided in the resources, but it's this is something that's created through digital media and provides an interactive form of reporting, which is very helpful. It helps to show the AONB quite clearly. It identifies the background to nature recovery planning and nature recovery work. You just scroll down through these presentations. It provides a summary of the AONB, what's important about the nature in the AONB. The report itself is contained within this document. You can click on this link here. And then it runs through a background to the landscape quality of the area. I think it's going to take a little bit of a while to load this, but it gives you a summary of where we are in the south of the country. Zoom in, take a closer look, and it starts to identify some of the key features across our landscape, the designated sites, the statutory protected sites, which are quite diverse and wide-ranging across the AONB. and identify some of those specifically. The zones you see here are associated with the Beer Quarry and Caves SAC and the BAT zones, which has been some of the work we've been doing this year with the District Council, particularly to try and identify those zones and how they apply in the planning policy framework within the district. And it also identifies non-statutory sites, county wildlife sites, and regionally important sites. Strategic nature areas are mapped across the AONB as part of this State of Nature report. And you can see how rich and diverse the landscapes are across East Devon. It's particularly diverse, despite it being so small, AONB. And those nature areas will be an important part of nature recovery across the district, but also across the county. And then there's a section on special sites, sites of special scientific interest. And there's a nice little slider bar here that helps you to see the condition of those triple SIs and what state they're in, whether they're favourable, unfavourable, or unfavourable recovering. And then details of priority habitats, which are areas that are not necessarily designated, but important parts of our landscape and will form an important part of a joined up network across the AONB. It's got ancient woodland habitat, which is a piece of work we've been doing this year. The ancient woodland inventory covers 2% of the AONB at the moment, but that inventory is being reviewed as we speak, and I think is in its final year. A county-wide approach to the ancient woodland has been undertaken, and hopefully that will potentially reveal areas that have not previously been identified, that will enable us to promote mechanisms to support and enhance those very important habitats, which provide such a rich part of our natural heritage. And then special species, which Lindy's going to touch on, but we've got species that we've identified as priorities for us across the AONB, and these are mapped within the report, and they're enclosed here within this storyboard map. And then there's a few final closing slides on natural capital, and where the priorities are, and particularly for woodland. You can see the darker areas on this map where the woodland cover is very high. The woodland cover across the AONB is very high already. We're something approaching 18% within the AONB, but obviously targets are regional, national, to increase that woodland cover. Floodplains, obviously we've got two major catchments within our patch, and those are significant natural capital element to the AONB, and the water quality of those floodplains is obviously very important consideration for us, for land management, and for the environment as a whole. So it's just a quick counter through that. I thought it'd be very helpful for you to see that, to appreciate what's gone into that. It will be available online for I think about a year, and then we lose the license on that. But if you get a chance to have a look at that through the resources, please do. I'm going to take you back to the slideshow now. Our Nature Connectedness Programme, that was a commitment under the Constitutional Declaration. I mentioned already that we've secured Arts Council funding for a Nature Connection programme that's been working closely with local schools and organisations. Details of that should hopefully be loading up soon, but we've been doing an awful lot of work with school children, particularly focused around the Hertford Wood area, and we've been doing that jointly with Double Elephant Print Workshop from Exeter, and Emma Maloney, who some of you may recall used to work for Thelma Hulbert Galleries, a freelance artist working in our area. And there's some nice resources that have come out of that work. There's a literary sound walk, which has been produced by someone called Ellen Wiles. If you get a chance to listen to that, it's a beautiful exploration of the landscape, and she describes it so vividly. You feel as if you're almost there with her on the walk. And this program has achieved an awful lot in a very small space of time, but is providing opportunities for us to consider how we can engage with a diverse range of communities across the AONB, and particularly some of those that don't normally get out into the countryside. And then our species recovery work, we've continued with that this year, and I'll leave Lindi to talk through how we particularly trying to tackle some of our elucidate key species across the AONB. I thought I'd give you a little heads up as to our thinking around our nature recovery plan. We've done some sort of a simulation of the information that was produced through the State of Nature report, and we've looked at how we might target and approach a nature recovery plan across the AONB. We've taken into consideration landscape character, catchments, the strategic nature areas and priority habitats, and obviously the species that we're looking to focus on across the AONB. We've got three obvious catchments across the AONB: the otter, the sid, and the axon limb, which provide a good framework for us to structure a nature recovery plan around. And then we've got the coastal zone, which that breakdown really reflects also the landscape character that we have across the AONB. We've got two national character areas and a number of county and district level character zones, and we will use, this is our thinking, is we will use this approach to focus and zone some of our targeted work for nature recovery across the AONB. We can't do that as a whole. It's very difficult resource-wise to achieve that across the AONB, but we've got some obvious areas that we can target and link in and connect with existing programs to provide some focus areas for us to work on within those zones. So that's early thinking at the moment, and the structuring and sort of form of that plan will develop over the coming 2 years as we go through a management plan review, and also as the district and county develop an approach to local nature recovery strategy that's going to be a requirement for implementation over the coming years. This year, I already mentioned, we've got our Farming and Protected Landscapes programme. Pete's going to talk about that. It's a 3-year programme. We're in our first year, just coming to the very end of that. It's been a very challenging programme to get underway. It's been new for DEFRA. It's a fantastic opportunity for us. As Alistair said, it's a major programme of funding. It's over £500,000 of funding for us over the 3-year programme. And we're very hopeful that it will enable us to continue to deliver in this way beyond 2024. I think the signs so far have been very positive, and I think if for those of you who have read the government response, they want to build on this approach. And then other work that we've been doing, we've been busy trying to improve links off the East Devon Way. Mike Green, who I don't know if he's in this meeting, but normally is one of our ambassadors, and a range of others, and our local ramblers have been very helpful in maintaining and upkeeping the East Devon Way, but also improving its linkages to local communities and particularly to the South West Coast Path. We've been undertaking an undergrounding programme, which is supported through Western Power Distribution, who we're all been probably quite closely associated with recently, one way or another. We have done an undergrounding scheme in the past on Aylesbury Common. We're now focusing on a scheme at Budley Salterton and the Lower Otter that is intended to integrate with the Lower Otter restoration programme taking place there. And we've also got a focus around Firebeacon Hill, where we're looking to remove the 33 kV lines over that local nature reserve. We've been very active supporting local partnerships, in particular Devon Local Nature Partnership, where the AONBs are actively involved, supporting new guidance that's come through that, called Right Place, Right Tree, which is available online through the Devon Local Nature Partnership, but also through their Environment Viewer map to try and guide how tree planting is implemented across our landscapes in a way that won't undermine their landscape character or their biodiversity and nature value. And we've also been supporting the Devon-wide nature recovery mapping network, which has been coordinated through Devon Wildlife Trust and the LNP, and that will form a backbone for the county-wide, what looks like will be a county-wide approach to a local nature recovery strategy. And I think we've reported previously, we're on the East Devon Catchment Partnership, which is an increasingly active organisation and has got particular focus at the moment around the River Axe, where we're trying to address some of the significant challenges in that catchment to do with water quality and land management. And we've been doing supplementary work around that natural flood management in 2 catchments, the Corrie and the Collie. And we've continued with our planning policy work, although it's been rather stretched this year. We have tried to, we've completed our guidance documentation, which is on our website, and the back consultation zones, which I referred to earlier. Pete has been actively supporting Natural England and District Council in that work. And our Communities Project Fund, I think, is going to be pretty much fully allocated this year again, which is very positive in what's been another challenging year for us. But it does show us that this local fund, which is a relatively light touch fund, can produce significant benefits on the ground within communities across the AONB. And I just wanted to in the closing slides, talk about briefly, two major initiatives that are taking place or have taken place across the AONB. The first is the River Otter Beaver project and what that's led to, which is the government consultation on the reintroduction of beavers. I think we can't underscore how important this potentially may be for the reintroduction of natural species into our landscape, and ones that can potentially have such a significantly positive benefit. I know there are lots of issues associated with them in the farm landscape, but the potential benefit that these creatures can provide to our landscapes could be quite significant. That consultation took place in November, I think it ended in November of this year, and it'd be very interesting to see what the outcome of that is and what it means for further reintroductions within our country. You know, you can at the moment the beavers have the opportunity to spread beyond the otter. Under the trial conditions they couldn't, but now they can, and there's nothing to stop them as their population increases spreading into the wider catchments across East Devon, and there's potential in the future 20 years from now for seeing beavers in others of our catchment across the AONB. And then the other major initiative that's taken place and is connected because it's in the same river is the Lower Otter Restoration Project, which is a major habitat mitigation project that's taken place at the lower reaches of the Otter. For those of you that have had the chance to get down there and see that, you can see how significant a change that's going to be in that landscape and what it's going to mean for the flood resilience, but also the habitats across there, and also the recreational usage of that area. It's not going to be without its challenges, but it does provide a significant opportunity for restoring a landscape back to its more natural form in a way that can be more climate sensitive and adaptive. So 2 major undertakings, and it'll be interesting to see how they shape our landscapes in the coming years. And then looking ahead, we've got a busy couple of years ahead of us. We've got the final couple of years of our FIPL programme, but if I'm being really positive, I think it will continue beyond 2024. I think there will be a role for us in the new environmental land management programme, and it could be an adapted version of what we're currently doing under the Farming and Protected Landscapes programme, which is having significant benefits already. We'll continue our special species work around the elusive 8 and others. Our nature recovery planning will be in place, and our community action work around that, and we'll continue to try and connect as many people and communities as we can to our fantastic landscapes. We have our farmers groups that we hope to be able to continue to run alongside our Farming and Protected Landscapes programme. And we've got some big celebrations coming up. We've got our 60th anniversary in 2023. And I know what it's like to be 60, so it's a big year. We have the review of our partnership plan, which needs to be completed in 2024. And there's a lot of expectation riding on that plan and what it will mean and where it will take us. And I sense with the Glover review and the actions that are currently taking place within DEFRA in the background around that, there is a new chapter and a new era for AONBs. So it's a very exciting, busy, challenging, but great opportunity for the next couple of years ahead of us. And that's me. I'm hoping I'm within time. My alarm hasn't gone off, but that could be because I didn't set it. And I'm just gonna wind up there. And I think I'll hand you straight over to Pete. I think we'll continue this sync for the first 3 presentations, and then we may take some questions at the end of that session. As I said, please use the chat function if you've got any, and we'll try and collate those and catch them at the end of the session. But I will stop sharing my screen and I shall hand you across to Pete. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I will share my screen and kick off. Lovely. Okay, so the landscape we treasure today was created by generations of farmers and foresters. Their importance was recognised back in 1949 with the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act, which required us to set out our primary purpose, conserving and enhancing the natural beauty, but at the same time ensured that we had took due regard of agriculture whilst delivering that primary purpose. Agriculture in the 1960s, 1963 we were designated, was very different. This is the machinery that was revolutionising agriculture in 1963, and this is what any serious farmer is using today. Clearly, it allows the land to be worked much harder and productivity to be increased. Other changes that have existed since 1963, the obvious ones are loss of hedgerows, loss of orchards, but also new crops, perhaps crops which were never envisaged back in 1963. So we've got oilseed rape, obviously has a big impact on the landscape. Maize, big environmental impacts as well, but increasingly use of plastics and fleece materials on crops obviously has a landscape impact. And the other obvious one is just the scale of farm buildings that we see in the landscape now. Obviously, it also has a massive increase in its effect of the landscape of the AONB. I think the other change that has occurred since 1963, in 1963, 26.9% of family income was spent on food, and in 2020, it's estimated that we're only spending 8% of our family income on food. So two things happening there. Food has become relatively much cheaper, but at the same time, farmers have increased just how hard they have to work the land. So farming in the AONB is very important. 72% of the AONB is being farmed, with a further 18% is just woodland. And to reflect that, we have two partnership plan policies, which are basically about supporting positive land management with the AONB, diversification, and whilst maintaining, enhancing the special qualities of the AONB. Whilst we've always promoted the national agri-environment schemes such as countryside stewardship, entry-level stewardship, we're very fortunate now to have a purpose-built agri-support system, which is available to all areas of outstanding natural beauty and national parks in England. That's our Farming in Protected Landscapes programme. It's funded by DEFRA, and it's designed to assist landowners, land managers with the transition from European focused funding to more domestic focused funding for agricultural support. The programme has 4 main themes: climate, nature, people and place, and we'll just explore those a bit further now. So climate, very much about increasing the amount of carbon that's stored on the farm, reducing flood risk, and increasing farmers' understanding of the importance of carbon on their farm, and making the landscape more resilient to climate change. So sort of things that we're promoting and encouraging with under that particular theme is obviously tree planting, restoration of orchards, planting of hedges, all add to the carbon storage on farms. Planting of trees in hedgerows as well, an obvious one, but also managing the soil differently, increase the carbon content, the organic matter within the soil, all helps to increase the carbon stored within the farm, using minimum till techniques, so not deep ploughing, not turning over the soil and putting the organic matter with it deep into the soil out of the reach of the following on crop. And that in turn, using minimum till techniques, perhaps improves infiltration rates, which slows down runoff from heavy rainfall. So that's sort of direct measure we can use to help deliver for climate through farming and protected landscapes. The second one is nature. Very familiar themes there, I would suggest, if you're at all familiar with the Lawton report, but fundamentally more of it, better connected and better quality, really. So again, the sort of thing that we can hope to deliver with farming and protected landscapes is restoration and creation of ponds, increasingly using native breeds to graze certain habitats which wouldn't support your mainstream farm animals. So on such sites as Heathland and mire and on improved grassland, and also the harvesting of wildflower seeds and then using that seed to recreate and improve the biodiversity interest in less interesting grasslands. Third theme is people. People are obviously very important. The scheme basically is looking to encourage more people from a more diverse background into the AONB. Again, if you're familiar with the Glover report, that's one of the outcomes that he wants AONBs to increasingly deliver. So able to give farmers payments to encourage educational access onto their farms, provide them with perhaps classroom facilities, equipment to allow them to run events, and also for organizations to perhaps target hard to reach groups and bring them out into the AONB, into the countryside, in order to enjoy the therapeutic effects that we're all familiar with of actually spending time out and about in the open countryside. Encouraging more opportunities for people to get actively involved in management of the AONB. So opportunities perhaps to work with the farmers to plant trees on the land or learn to lay hedges, that sort of thing. And or it could be that a grant to a farm to develop perhaps a mountain bike hire facility, or bird watching opportunities within their farm, or possibly badger watching on their farms. And the final theme being place. This is very much about the quality and character of the landscape. This is where we are able to look at scheduled ancient monuments, veteran trees, again, looking to conserve and enhance those, but also to increase people's understanding and appreciation of those attributes of the AONB. And the core of FIPL basically is to try and increase the resilience of nature-friendly, sustainable farm businesses, which hopefully then also helps support the local rural economy. Funding-wise, we've got 518 and 937,000 pounds to deliver over 3 years, a very precise number. In year one, 153,000, which we've had since July. Quite a challenge to deliver that level of funding in just a few months, but we've had 18 successful applications, and we have 41 expressions of interest. So lots of interest within the farming and landowning community with FIPL. Next year is the big year, £213,000. We've got a whole year to deliver that, so hopefully that won't be as challenging. But and then year three, back to 152,000. We were keen to structure the payments so that most of the delivery was in year two, so we can maximise the time we've got to deliver, but also the amount of time that the benefits actually exist on the ground that are delivered through FIPL. The mechanics of FIPL decision making, minimum grant is 2,000. Any grant between 2,000 and 5,000 pounds is delegated to Chris as the countryside manager for approval, and anything over 5,000 to a maximum of 40,000 goes to our local access panel. Local assessment panel. That exists of 8 local experts who have expertise in the 4 themes of the program, and they basically decide whether it's value for money, whether it's sustainable, and whether it's something that we should be putting public money into. So one of the themes or core desires of FIPL is to encourage farmers to work together cooperatively, and we've had a couple of applications which indeed do that. But as an AONB, we've been encouraging our farming community to work collectively together since 2016. We've had or have had 3 farmers groups that we've been instrumental in setting up. We've got the East Devon Farmers Group, which is basically designed to encourage people to take up countryside stewardship. A farm resilience group, which is the delivered as part of the Prince's Countryside Fund's farm resilience program. So 20 local farmers there, bringing them together to share their experiences, but to bolster their business skills, recognizing that farmers are very good at growing crops and looking after their animals, but actually their core business skills are something that might be somewhat lacking, and by increasing those skills, perhaps we've got more sustainable farm enterprises which can be established. The third group is our East Devon Regen group. So Regen is short for regenerative farming, and it's something that I will tell you a little bit more about, but that is funded via Farming in Protected Landscapes. So East Devon Farmers Group, 69 farming families, as I say, formed in 2016. We've run a whole suite of events, typically notable carbon audit workshops, so they can begin to work out how much carbon they're storing or producing on their farm, and work towards reducing, their net carbon output. Protected species, so bats, owls, dormouse, we've had sessions on. Getting the best from your manure, which is perhaps a little bit of a specialist interest, but looking at the value of nutrient value of their slurry, how to apply it to maximize productivity and reduce environmental disbenefits. Meadow management, particularly on improved grassland, which links very nicely with the grey long-eared bat project, which Lindi will tell you a little bit more about. Hedge laying demonstrations, looking at woodland management, obviously workshops explaining countryside stewardship and just what they would be involved in if they went into agreement. And more recently, looking at ammonia and how farms can mitigate the release of ammonia from their farming activities. So far, we've delivered 43 countryside stewardship agreements, and our group is run in partnership with Fike Southwest and the Devon Bat Project. East Devon Regen Group, regenerative farming is it's a wide spectrum of activities, ranging all the way up to rewilding, but they have some key techniques, if you like, which they all have in common. So the group, 28 farming families, funded, as I said, via FIPL. Basically, what we're looking to do is take the farmers out to visit farms, early adopters of regenerative farming techniques, or bring in specialist speakers of early adopters so that they can look at their farming practices and see how they can adequately or begin to adopt regenerative farming techniques to their farm enterprise. The key of regenerative farming really is looking after your soil, so in enhancing the organic matter, the microbes, to improve productivity whilst reducing artificial inputs. And the idea being that you can operate a low input system with low returns, but to actually have overall profitability at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, profitability is important because you have to feed your family. So as I say, regenerative farming very much about looking after the soil, recognizing that soil is a habitat in its own right, that it needs managing positively, and so the techniques look to basically increase the health of the soil. So herbal lays particularly are part and parcel of regenerative farming. The principle being that typical grasslands roots only penetrate a very short distance, and so only access nutrients and water from the top layer of the soil. Whereas by introducing a mix of perhaps 12 herbs into the soil, you get deeper root penetration. You can access deeper minerals and nutrients, and also improve infiltration rates. And this was proved in drought 2 years ago, when the only fields in the Collie Valley were actually herbal lays. The rest of the grass had all burnt out. Just quickly, I will move on and talk about holistic grazing. So principle here is if you let the grass grow taller, you get more roots, and again, deeper roots penetrate better for more nutrients, more soil moisture. Whereas typical farming techniques sort of keep the grass quite short, so you've got limited root growth on the bottom of them. And it's a rule of thirds. Basically, you let the grass grow, you then graze a third of it off, you let the cattle or sheep trample a third, and you leave a third. So that increases, by letting them trample, you increase the organic matter in the field. You leave it taller than you normally would, which means it can recover quicker because its roots are deeper. And this is typically operated with a electric fence, temporary electric fence, to give them a small strip of grazing, and that's moved on a regular basis very frequently with a rear fence so that it can't go back and selectively graze the stuff that you've asked them to leave. So that's a whistle-stop tour of holistic grazing. It's an awful lot more complicated than that, but just to give you a flavour, really. Finally, I've been asked to say what we hope to do in the future. I think Chris has touched on that fairly well, but I think we will continue to support our farming communities to maintain the landscape and the environment that we all love, treasure and enjoy. And finally, I'd just like to set you a little challenge. If you can tell me where this picture is taken through the chat function, we'll test how good your knowledge of the AONB landscape really is. And with that, I will pass back to Chris.
I'm not going to enter that competition. That would be fair. Are we allowed to, Pete? Is that
well, if you think you recognise it, Chris, then feel free.
Oh, okay, thank you very much, Pete. Yeah, please do use the chat function for your answer to that, but also any other queries. Very interesting to see where you think that is. Thanks so much, Pete. Really interesting whistle-stop tour. You covered an awful lot of stuff there, and there's an awful lot other stuff that's been going on through that. And maybe opportunities for us in our field visit. If we do get to have our summer field visit, maybe we can touch on some of that regenerative farming and you know, these programs. I think that would be very interesting. So, okay, right, wildlife next. I will hand you over to Lindi Rich, who will talk about our focus on wildlife.
Okay, saving special species and engagement events. I'm just going to run you quickly through what we've been doing in the last year. So a saving special species project update is what I'm going to do first. So first of all, the grey long-eared bat Return of the Night Rider project, which you may remember we talked about last year. It's been very successful. We obtained 69k to support a project in 2020. The funding work has now been completed, including enhancement and management of grasslands, engagement with local people, and supporting the development of a volunteer base. So just a quick explanation of the grey long-eared bat. It's very, very rare bat in this country. You can see the sites for it are only on the south coast of England. There are 8 main maternity roosts for the species, but with 2 being in East Devon. So some of the events we've held alongside that, as part of that project, some meadow walks, farmers walks to talk about meadow management, some school engagement work with puppets, bat puppets at Hawkchurch Primary School. Some seeds, obviously wildflower seeds were collected and grasslands were enhanced with the wildflower seed. You can see the seed being dried there and collected on the left. Looking forward, we want to continue to do roost surveys and monitoring in conjunction with the bat group. We continue to do support bat-friendly management of grasslands through our FIPL grants, public engagement and nature recovery. I'm going to aim to improve habitat connectivity, particularly near the important roosts, through our various schemes. Moving on to the brown hare streak, we've been some pictures here just showing you what the brown hare streak looks like. The brown hare streak caterpillars feed on blackthorn in our hedgerows mainly. And here's one of the eggs of the brown hare streak, very tiny. That's obviously enlarged up quite a lot. Very beautiful little eggs that are laid on the blackthorn. And for the last 2 years, we've been doing a brown hair streak egg hunt during the winter. So this is the second year now, but these are the results from the first year, where you can see the main focus of the red dots shows where you actually found eggs, which are mainly around the Colliford sort of Seaton area. And unfortunately, this area, we didn't find, we haven't found any eggs at the moment, but we're still looking. So that's continuing until the end of this winter, when the eggs start to hatch and you can't look for them anymore. And with looking forward, we're now aiming to move forward from the egg surveys and work with landowners to improve habitat management for the brown hair streak. We're focusing on a lighter touch hedgerow management with reduced flailing, to ensure that the eggs, which are typically laid on younger growth, survive the autumn and winter. We also want to encourage farmers to leave some hedgerow sections uncut each year, especially on the south-facing hedgerows. And you can see here, if you do have a slightly more lighter touch, you do end up with a lot more flowering as well, which is good for a whole range of invertebrates and birds when you get some left to fruit as well. Moving on to the heath lobelia, some of you will be aware we've been working on this for a couple of years. It was first discovered in the 1760s at Kilmington. It flowers from late July until early September, and it has quite exacting habitat requirements of acid heathland. So we've been working to, because the population is really threatened in East Devon, with only one site originally remaining, we've been growing seed with a group of volunteers, and they were planted out in September this year at a site in Kilmington. And then the management work is ongoing, raking up, cutting grass, raking up the grass, supporting the new population that's been established on Kilmington Common. And the future work, we will continue to support the volunteer group to manage the meadow. And we will look at the options for a third site for reintroduction with advice from external experts. Some other highlights from our 2001 public engagement programme: making bat masks at the Donkey Sanctuary, making butterfly kites with Creative Cabin, autumn shoot deer park walk and coastal whitebeam walk. And looking forward now to species that we haven't done a great deal of work on up till now, we're looking at working on the pearl-bordered fritillary, and for the coming year, we're planning to visit Aylesbury and the northern Pebblebed Commons in May to assess if there's any population, and combine this with engagement work with local residents. And we'll work in partnership with the RSPB and Devon Clinton Estates to consider what forward actions we should be taking on that species. And similarly, the small pearl-bordered fritillary also lives in the same sort of habitats and is also on the pebblebed heaths. We're looking to, again, similarly assess the population, as they can be on the same site, so it would work in tandem, and then consider what actions we want to do to take forward. Another species we want to do a bit more on in 2022 is a Best-Times bat. It's a woodland bat which relies on old trees with crevices for its roosting sites. It was once common when there were more ancient woodland trees and veteran trees, but it's now one of our rarer bats. Our focus for this coming year is to concentrate on survey and monitoring of foraging and roosts, following on from our radio tracking work done in previous years. Connectivity of habitats for bats will also be addressed with our new nature recovery project. Lesser and greater horseshoe bats, these two species are a nature conservation success story. With a lot of work having gone on in the last 20 years, the populations are actually increasing in the UK. We will continue to help and support the monitoring of roosts, support bat-friendly management of habitats through our schemes and grants, and improve habitat connectivity with a focus on habitats near the roost. We'll also be running some bat-friendly gardening engagement activities this coming year. Two species we're going to add to the ones that we've been looking at so far. The heath potter wasp, a very interesting wasp that has a stronghold in the pebble bed heaths. We're planning to evaluate what we could be doing for the species this year. It could involve surveys, habitat work, education, awareness, and events. And again, the scaly cricket similarly, it actually lives on shingle beaches along our coast, near Branscombe, and we'll be perhaps talking to the National Trust and see if what direction we think we should take with that one, and work in partnership if there are actions we will take. So two fascinating species to learn more about and work on this year. And finally, I just want to go through quickly the parish nature recovery project that we're just starting up, just so to help you understand our new direction mainly with engagement work. It is based on the culture to declaration principles of nature recovery, species action, and engagement to form healthier, more connected communities. During 2022, we now plan to take a parish-focused approach to public engagement by taking nature recovery and climate change activities and events directly to residents in parishes within the AONB. The advantages of this include reduced travel carbon emissions and an increase in sustainable local action. So there are 5 main areas of output for this project we're starting up. Nature recovery speaks for itself, species conservation, special species work, nature connectedness through art, climate adaptation, and carbon emissions reduction. So a quick look at some of the things that we might be doing. The engagement work will involve a series of nature recovery engagement activities, walks and talks provided to the parish by the AONB team. We're running this scheme with 2 parishes as a pilot, really, and with a view to expanding it to other parishes the following year if we are successful in getting some grant money. The activities will be free and easily accessible, and for the most part will be accessed on foot from the parish for which we are targeting. Our first parish that we're targeting is going to be Newton, Poppleford and Hertford. Tools and materials will be made available, including wildflower seeds, spades, trees. Activities will be advertised locally, and some separate activities and engagements will be offered to the local school. The project will be developed to test the approach. And here's some of the possible projects. What we're going to do is work in tandem with a parish, identifying which projects, which activities they particularly like to do in their parish. So we would select some of these options for nature recovery that were more appropriate for the parish, and then work with the parish on those. So some of those might include river corridor management, so that would be relevant to Newton Poppleford, parish and nature verge management might also be relevant, creating a nature map of connections and opportunities, hedgerow management, pond creation, grassland management. So that's just some examples of what we might do with each parish. On climate adaptation, we might offer talks, tips on reducing electricity use, supporting developing wetland and river corridor management with the aim of flood reduction, information on solar power, and support climate adaptation funding bids. So that's just a taster really of what we're planning to do. And then nature connectedness through arts, we'd be hopefully doing some printing workshops. We'd have some art workshops organised for the school in the parish. And we're planning to have pop-up activity stall during the summer holiday on the playing field to get local kids directly involved, where nobody has to actually travel. They can just walk from their houses to the events. So it's, again, some examples. And to finish off, really, this is just a possible timeline. It's an imaginary timeline, really, of having chosen selected events to work with the particular parish that we'd be working with. This how a year might look, with a selection of different events happening through the year, involving volunteers, the school, and rare species monitoring and gardening advice. And so that's the end of my little introduction to the species review of this year and looking at next year.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Lindi. A whistle-stop tour through planned work this year. I don't know if Pete, we've got some time now for some questions if you've got any. Pete, do you want to, we'll start off with just revealing this landscape. Do you want to show that slide again? I don't think we've got any correct responses back. So just to keep you, take you off tenterhooks, so to speak. Pete will show you this slide again, hopefully. And tell you where it is. It is in East Devon, definitely. I'm very familiar with where it is, if that's a clue to any of you. I'm a bit disappointed that some people that live in this valley haven't spotted where it is, but there you go, this happens. Things on your doorstep sometimes. The suspense is killing me, Pete. Have you shared it yet? There we go.
I've shared it.
You've shared it?
Yeah.
Here we go. So down there on the bottom right of the screen is a farm complex. And that is called Sand Farm. And that is on Roncombe Lane.
Oh.
Oh, we've lost it. Sand Farm's disappeared.
Sorry.
Right there. Roncombe Lane. And then to the left, in the centre, left of centre, is the village of Sidbury. And then in the background, you have East Hill Strips, the long plateau top with the woodland cover. So there you go. That's Sid Valley, looking down the Roncombe. So we'll do the same again next time, but thank you folks. There wasn't anything writing on that, but thank you for participating. We've got an opportunity now. Is it the back of Mutters? Well, not far. No, not quite. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so we've got a chance for some questions. If you have any questions, I don't know if there's any that have come up in the chat, but if there aren't and you want to speak now, either pop your hand up in the screen and we'll look at you and you can fire away, or type something down as any questions. We've got a few minutes and then we're going to have a coffee break. Are there any questions from any of the presentations that we've given this morning? Yes, Andrew Locke, I can see your hand up. You're on mute, Andrew, so I think you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, firstly, by means of a brief introduction, Alistair Rivers Association committee member and retired EA fisheries officer. Obviously fish is my greatest love. I'm just raising a start of a 10 is to species recovery as to possibly the inclusion of any aquatic species on the SAC list, SAC citation. There's 2 lampreys and bullhead. Probably everybody equally knows that the migratory salmonids problems on the axe and the otter. Just really a personal and Axevale Rivers Association involvement, sort of expression of interest to possibly include a fish species within the species recovery list. And also I suspect very much that Avra will be joining as an ambassador or applying to be an ambassador very soon. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Andrew. I recognise you now. I think we've met at a few meetings in the past. Forgotten. Yeah. Well, a long time ago, I think it was a Cyclo project with Mr. Panton. But you got it. Yep. Yeah, been around a while. You had the beard then. Yeah. Yes. Well, me neither. But yeah, I think we're kind of addressing that in a way. So we chose our species. There are 30 species that we could have chosen from that were shortlisted from the Devon Special Species List for East Devon as a whole, which is a reflection of the diversity of the habitat we have across the area. And we took an approach with our ambassadors through an event like this 2 years ago to hone down that species list into a smaller number that we could focus around. Doesn't mean that wider number is ignored.
And actually, in fact, Lindy's touched on 2 others that have effectively expanded that 8 to a 10. And we could expand it to 30 or 60. And we will. And I think that's the answer is we want to focus around 8, but we're not going to ignore the others. So the work we're doing in the ACTS with the East Devon Catchment Partnership, the idea around trying to form these farm transformation plans, AVRA's involved with the East Devon Catchment Partnership. You're part of what we're looking at there. And that is entirely driven to try and address the issues around the triple SI and the water quality in the river system across the ACTS as a whole. So lampreys, bullheads, aquatic, water, we're not going to ignore those. They're just not in the headlines that we're producing them, but they're absolutely part of our approach, Andrew. So thank you for that question. Tim Dumper's got a hand up, I think. Tim?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'm very pleased to see the Heath Potter wasp, which I remember voting for at the event.
Oh, it was you.
Anyway, other than that, I just wondered what, I don't think, unless I missed it, that Lindi mentioned which the second pilot parish was after Newton Pop and Hertford. So have we got another pilot parish?
We do, yes. It will be, hopefully, Upline.
Right.
And there's a resident here on the, well, sort of temporary resident here on the on the grouping today who's been helpful in trying to assist in that engagement process. But that's the anticipation, yeah.
Right.
But Lindi was probably hanging back on doing that because I don't think she's given a presentation yet. So yeah. There's a note here from Steve Waite. Not really a question, but there always seems to be a shame that seeping wetlands and lower access are not within an urban area, not included within the East Devon AONB boundary, unless that's changed. No, good point, Steve. No, it hasn't changed. The boundary was set in 1963 and it's not altered since. But referring to the Glover Review and AONBs and boundaries and national landscapes, the review identified a need to reconsider the designation process, but also the review process for boundaries. And you're not alone in thoughts around Seaton, Colleton, and also more recently West Hill have queries and questions about the AONB boundary. So there have been some changes to some AONB boundaries recently. You may have seen on Country File, the Suffolk Coast and Heaths AONB had a recent boundary variation. It's taken 20 years for that, by the way. And then one in the system now is the Surrey Hills AONB, and that's been going for 15 years, but that's the next one. It's far too long for those changes, but we'll see what the government reviews, the Glover consultation brings about in terms of change. But there's a process going on in the background around boundary reviews and boundary changes. So, but it doesn't happen easily. Okay, so another question there. Thank you, Lindi, for a fascinating talk where adjacent parishes able to be involved in the project. We're based in Tipton, so they're near to Hertford and Newton Pop. I think that would be welcomed. I'll leave Lindi to answer that, but I think the approach should be that it's as inclusive as it possibly can be. Lindi, do you want to?
Sorry, was that inclusion of Tipton?
I think it is, yeah, Tipton, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, I think Tipton would be a really good parish to include. But what we're planning to do is hopefully put a bid together in the summer to fund an expansion of the project for the following year. So yeah, I mean, if any parishes are interested, I can pencil them down for a consideration is all I can say, because we're not quite at that stage yet. It's a sort of pilot at the moment to see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, I can see Tipton might be a good parish to include in another phase the following year, if possible.
And I think, thanks, Lindi. But I think also, some of these communities are relatively close, so the principle of being able to engage in something adjacent and maybe having a parish hub around which other parishes could engage is something that we could obviously encourage and explore. So
yeah,
I mean,
I think yeah, I think if an event has got spare spaces, we plan to sort of advertise them a bit more widely. So that would be a good opportunity for neighbouring parishes, perhaps get an extra opportunities through it.
Good stuff. Well, let's say any more questions or floating hands. I can't see any. We've got a planned 10-minute break now. So I'm going to do my best to run you through quite a lot of detail around the Glover review, sort of recap, and a little bit around the approach that we are looking at within the National Association for AONBs. It's still work in progress, so consultation is still open, and it's evolving and developing within our National Association as I speak. So just a quick recap on what the Glover Review was. It took place in 2018-19. The report was produced in 2019. We had one of the panel members visit us here in East Devon and had an opportunity to meet with our chair and vice chair and talk through the issues for us. I met with Julian Glover up on the Dorset coastline at near Golden Cap. He came along to a number of our conferences, and we had lots of different meetings with the panel members across the country. It was the first time that the national parks and AONBs had been reviewed in 70 years, and it was planned to be part of the 25-year environment plan, if you like, to look at creating landscapes that were fit for the 21st century. The review was produced in September 2019, and it was always made very clear at the time by Julian Glover that it didn't necessarily mean there would be more money, and actually, literally, it did not have to be responded to by the government if they didn't really feel like responding to it. Well, unfortunately they have, and they've started to do that, but it was a review and it didn't have any statutory sort of obligations as a result of it. But it came up with 24 proposals under 5 themes. And in the summary sort of introduction to the document, it was pretty clear about what its expectations were, particularly with AONBs. It was quite targeted in its comments about AONBs. It saw them as being, of the 2 designations, perhaps more fleet of foot and the more modern thinking and adaptive, despite its limitations, and it liked the model of delivery. But there were some issues around that, and it regarded some of those needed addressing through potentially funding, but also governance and reform. So that's the kind of headline for what the review was. It sat there. A lot of activity and engagement took place after that, and it took 2 years to get to a position where the government was able to put together a response. You could add that they had a few distractions over the last year and a half or so, which is fair enough. But now we're in a position where we've got a consultation document, a review of that review, if you like, and a consultation process underway. So what I've tried to do in my summary, I had oodles of slide, and I've tried to rationalise them down a little bit so that I'm basically give you some of the proposals that Glover identified, the key ones, not all of them. I'm not covering them all in this presentation, but what the key ones that were identified by Glover and how the government consultation or the response to that is looking to address those and consider them in their response. So the first one was around AONBs being strengthened with new purposes, powers and resources, and interestingly renamed as national landscapes. The acronym AONB doesn't really trip off the tongue very easily. It's quite often written down wrongly, and even Julian Glover in one of his own communications called us ANOBs. So you know, there's an appetite for changing, but also to give and underscore the importance of their national status, which is felt is kind of lost in that title. Quite a lot of debate and issues around that, but the response from the government is the package of reform and purposes set out in that they agree with in principle, and that action needs to be a priority in particular for AONBs in order to unlock their potential and to achieve parity to a certain extent with national parks. So that's about strengthening purposes and powers and resources and renaming. Proposal 25 was actually in the document was about producing a new landscape service. And that, you may recall, actually hit the headlines a bit. There was quite a lot of concern about the creation of a new body, a new organisation, and it was very uncertain about where that would sit. Locally within the Southwest National Parks, particularly Exmoor and Dartmoor, were very vocal about their concern about the establishment of a new landscape service. It wasn't clear where it sat between DEFRA and Natural England, and also how much funding it might potentially absorb that's already going towards protected landscapes. So there's been quite a lot of backtracking from that statement, I suppose, in that proposal, and they're looking at a partnership of organisations, which would be a representation from the parks and the National Association, but would also be joined by the National Trails, whose issues and constraints have been identified as part of this review process. And that this partnership would help to generate income, champion the protected landscapes, develop partnerships, create opportunities, improve training and development, and share knowledge. Something that we already really do through the National Association to a certain extent, but a more cohesive and coherent one that ties in particularly the national parks and AONBs, and in the future potentially national trails. Talked about a stronger mission for nature recovery. If you remember some of the PR before the consultation, that I think there was from some of the NGOs was that national parks and AONBs are where nature goes to die. I think that was a headline. I took that rather personally. It wasn't. It's not what we're trying to do here, as you can see from the work that we're trying to deliver in our AONB. But it was based around some of the evidence to do with the statutory sites and their status and whether they were failing or not. And you could argue that, you know, in certain parts of certain AONBs and national parks, there has been a degradation of the nature value within those landscapes. So this was meant to writ large a new purpose, if you like, a new mission for national landscapes to be focused around nature recovery and its enhancement. It is implicit in our existing purposes, but I think the expectation would be that it should be more explicit, more clearly understood. And they wanted to also, well, in this proposal, at least in the response, they're talking about the principle of natural capital also being included within that process. And they talk quite challengingly about creating a single set of statutory purposes for AONBs and national park authorities, the teams and the authorities. And that's quite challenging, because if you think about that, where that sort of takes you is if the statutory purposes for AONBs and national parks are identical, then surely the resources should be identical. It begs questions about the equity and the approach and the formula used to deliver resources into these landscapes. So it does present some challenges, and it's an articulation of what those purposes are, whether they're statutory or guided, which may be something that comes through the consultation process. I talked about ambition and monitoring and providing more information around the natural capital, and also strengthening the management plans for the, in particular for AONBs, but management plans for the protected landscapes. The management plans at the moment for AONBs are not as strongly supported in the statutory process as they could be. I think this proposal is trying to address that. And part of the work that's taking place at the moment alongside this consultation and response is they're looking to develop some specific targets for nature recovery and climate that we can integrate into our management plans. And the timing of that's quite important. If we get that in 2023, we can consider how we integrate those into our management plan review process. Proposal 5 was around the agricultural transition approach and a central place for national landscapes in the new environmental land management scheme program, whatever it's titled now. They've tweaked and changed that, but fundamentally about us continuing to play a role in the way that we are, for example, at the moment through the Farming and Protected Landscapes program, which I will be heavily supportive of. The terminology they use here is to build on the lessons from FIPL and to look at how the special status of protected landscapes can be designed in to the new environmental land management program. So that would be very positive if that does evolve. And I think the proof will be in the pudding of how we deliver this program over the next 2 years. It's a test for us. It's a test for DEFRA as well. Stronger mission to connect people and players. Well, as you've already seen, we are doing that and trying to do that as best we can within the resources we have. And the Culture Declaration clearly articulates that. But also the Culture Declaration specifically said we will be able to achieve all these things if we're given the resources. So the response agrees that a second statutory purpose for national parks should help to sort of reinvigorate that connection between society and landscapes, but this should also be extended to AONBs. We don't have that. We simply have the primary purpose, which is to conserve and enhance. We don't have the secondary purpose that national parks have. And the suggestion here is that we should. Implications, obviously, there are the resources to be able to achieve that. And you can see recently how the impact of public engagement in these protected landscapes has played out. We've recently, I think on Country File, certainly in the news, we've had Dartmoor outlining the challenge that is facing them in terms of the increased public use of Dartmoor National Park and public understanding of these areas as well. Landscapes for everyone, a series of proposals around here about trying to improve and expand opportunities for community engagement in the national landscapes. And they're proposing setting up a coordinating function of that around this new landscape partnership that could be established, and to use that partnership to start to develop collaborative campaigns and events and programs. Planning reform. This was covered in Glover and outlined a proposal for increased planning function status for AONBs and for us to be given statutory consultee status. We don't have that at the moment. We're not like national parks. National parks have they are a planning authority in their own right. We don't have a statutory consultee status. No AONBs have statutory consultee status. Almost all have an agreed process of engagement with their local planning authorities through a planning protocol. Some AONBs have planning staff. Some don't have the resources to be able to employ them, and it ends up falling to specific officers within a team. But the proposal here was about trying to address that and also to review the National Planning Policy Framework. There are some challenges in there. Not all AONBs are behind the proposal to have statutory consultee status. Some where the pressure is higher are clearly very supportive of that, but recognise that it needs to be adequately resourced. And that is a big challenge in some of the southern and eastern AONBs. Management plans, as I mentioned earlier, the proposal 3 from Glover was around strengthening the management plans and to ensure that nature recovery and climate change are addressed within those. These changes would perhaps set the plans on a footing that meant that They were paid more due regard, as outlined under the Countryside Rights of Way Act, and that they would form an important part of local delivery. The landscape strategy would help to guide that, and to also identify the way in which protected landscapes could support nature recovery, climate change and adaptation. So those would be probably very welcome changes for many AONBs who do feel that on occasions the plans don't have the status they should within local planning authorities. Seem to be missing a box here, but sustainable financing is one of the areas that was identified. I don't know if it'll come up with a click or not, but there was talk about increasing and providing more diverse.
If you click it.
It will come on, will it, Kelly? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So increasing and diversifying the funding source to be able to support many of the aspirations for these 21st century protected landscapes. It's very clear that they're saying that within the current arrangements, the core grant that we receive through DEFRA doesn't allow them to achieve the scale of vision that they have within that document. And there's an expectation that will generate and build additional income. That's not easy. We've been trying to do that for about 10, 15 years. It's very hard to develop commercial relationships. You have to put an awful lot of work into it to be able to secure that. The environment's changing around that, to be fair. There are tradings, there are offsetting, net gain. There are other mechanisms that are evolving around us at the moment that might provide opportunities to do that. And I guess also the vision will be that the new landscape partnership, the National Landscapes Partnership, would have the resources to be able to develop national programs that could then be played out locally. And that will be a much more efficient mechanism for trying to achieve that additional funding. There was talk about governance for both AONBs and national parks. There was particular criticisms around the culture and the diversity within the partnerships and boards within national parks in particular. AONBs are slightly more recent and less culturally established in that sort of ingrained way, but both of them they talked about it with respect to both AONBs and national parks about how they go about establishing partnerships and operate those, and there's an expectation that change will happen and that we'll have a more diverse and broader cross-section of representation across these governance structures. And then I'll just a quick summary of what the so that was going back. I mean, I haven't covered all of the proposals. I haven't covered all of the areas. For those of you who've looked through the Glover consultation and also the response in detail, there are areas that I haven't touched on there because it would take quite a while to go through them all. But those are the key ones that we're trying to address and wrestle with within the National Association. And the discussions we've been having so far have focused around these 5 main themes that are really caught up and reflected in the Glover review and in the response as well. Around our purposes, you know, what are we going to be expected to address, and do, you know, the priorities and challenges, are they correctly reflected in our purposes? In our powers, what kind of teeth do we have as a protected landscape? And that you know, that refers to planning, but also our management plans, and also the duty of regard for public bodies and how they reflect the delivery of their duties, and that includes local authorities in respect of conserving and enhancing these areas. So those are the function elements of what we're looking to address in our response collectively. And then the form elements cover things around our governance. Have we got the right setup to be able to drive the change and work at local but also national level? Have we got the right levels of input around that? And at the moment, national parks and conservation boards have a national, somebody nationally what's the word, appointed to their boards to provide a sort of national guidance and connectivity. We don't have that within AONB partnerships generally. So it'd be interesting to see whether that's a consideration. And resources, what does a resilient funding model look like? There's talk that there isn't money from within the core budgets to address some of the issues. How then do we secure additional funding to be able to address some of the new purposes and challenges that will come about potentially as a result of these changes? And the private finance angle, as I've alluded to earlier, the expectation that the National Landscapes Partnership tries to address that. And then brand, National Landscapes is being proposed for AONBs. There are some people that are not happy with that within the AONB family. They think, they feel that the natural beauty terminology is very important and shouldn't necessarily be lost. It does speak volumes about a landscape in a sort of a creative and cultural way, in a way that National Landscapes doesn't. But also, does that allow us to sort of deliver and encapsulate a transformational agenda? So form and function are obviously closely related, and in order to deliver the functions, we need the form. So that's the approach we're taking across the National Association at the moment. We've had quite a lot of focus groups meetings with all the AONBs, and we've been trying to hammer through how we respond under each of these 5 themes. We're expecting to have an advocacy document that we can provide to partners. We've got a chair's briefing for the AONB chairman coming up in early March, which that advocacy document should be available for. I will look to circulate that when it's finalised through my partnership, and outline how we would address our response within East Devon, but also hopefully we can provide that to other parties who may wish to draw on that, if you're thinking of responding to the government consultation on this. And I think that's it from me. So that's a fairly quick, detailed response, not wholly composite in terms of the whole review process and the response, but hopefully it gives you a sense of where the key priorities are for us as an AONB, and the challenges that are going to be faced if some of these changes take place, and how we're trying to address that government consultation at the moment. So I'll stop sharing, and there's an opportunity now for any questions around this process.
There is a question from Nicola Westlake in the chat, Chris. You can read it out.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So Devon Wildlife Trust have a new Wilder Communities project with targets to get X percentage of community engaging with nature. Are we collaborating with Devon Wildlife Trust? There seems to be a lot of connections. I think that's a logical question, Nicola. Yeah, Devon Wildlife Trust are on our partnership, and hopefully they are very aware of what we are aiming to deliver and do with our species and nature recovery work. And I would hope they would be like the overlapping circles of the Culture Declaration diagram that were in that presentation. There will be overlapping circles that we will have with them. We already have connected with them. I think in one of the presentations that Lindi gave, the Saving Devon Trees is a program that we're already engaging with the Devon Wildlife Trust around, and we supported that through funding, but also through delivery on the ground. They're using some of our, looking to target some sites for monitoring landscape change, for example, through a loss of ash in our landscapes. And yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty of opportunities for us to look to develop. And I think that's one of the areas of exploration around a wider spreading out of our parish approach will be, how can we maximise delivery across the AONB with our partners? So absolutely, yeah, thank you. Any other questions from any folk? Have I sort of stunned you into silence with that Glover stuff, or is it all kind of soaking in like a big sponge? Oh,
There's a
Tim.
question from Tim.
Or asleep, Terry? No, hopefully not.
So sorry about this, Chris.
Go for it. It's okay.
Just to come in, I mean, when I've read bits about it and heard your presentation today, and I do worry a little. I mean, Britain is acknowledged to be one of the most centralized countries in the developed world, and I just wonder whether the pressures, you're already, the National Association has a reasonable amount of centralization on things that are required of it, I know, but I'm wondering whether this review and the consultations going on will actually take things away from the local democratic input and just put them with national and the money streams involved, etc. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's an obvious observation that you can draw from some of the terminology that's been used and the approaches we've experienced in the past. But I think the kickback from the proposal for a national landscape service really did underline the significance that the protected landscapes place in having locally determined partnerships, you know, aside from the national appointees that they get within the national park boards, the fact that these partnerships are set up and established locally and reflect local priorities, local needs, local pressures is a strongly felt feeling, and I think that's been reflected partly in how this response has been worded. I think if they felt strong and confident in remaining with the National Landscape Service option, that would have come through loud and clear in this response, and it hasn't. They've adapted that to a partnership approach, which I think is more in tune with the thinking that we have across the national parks and AONB's bodies. And I think the consultation will re-emphasise that. The response from the national parks and AONBs will re-emphasise the importance of that, and want to ensure that that national landscape partnership isn't nationally controlled in itself, that it does provide the opportunity for real voice and influence and shaping. And I think it potentially has a very positive, I see that if it's right, a national landscape partnership can bring all the positive outcomes that we get currently from the National Association and from National Parks England to the benefit of the local partnerships and their delivery on the ground. That's what I would hope we would achieve through this process. That would certainly that will be what's articulated back in the response from ourselves through the National Association, I'm sure.
Thank you for that, Chris.
Okay, you're welcome. Good. Well, this is the post-coffee tea cake sort of session. It's, you know, sometimes that's all sinking in and it starts to absorb a little bit of the energy, but hopefully you found those presentations interesting, useful. You know, if you haven't come up with a question now and you've got queries, do contact us. We're about ready to wrap up, I think, Kelly, but from this session, we will produce there'll be a web page where there'll be resources from all the presentations today and links that we've referred to in those presentations. So you don't have to have scribbled them all down or taken pictures of them. You'll hopefully get to see those, and that will provide you an opportunity to kind of follow this. We've also got a recording of this, which we'll be able to provide as well. So thank you. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for listening. And hopefully next time, folks, we'll get to see you in person. Yes, fingers crossed. Unless there's any more comments or questions, I'm going to close us down here and say thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.